Hi, welcome to Lecture 6, Part 2, Evaluations and Evidence. Let's get started. The purpose of this lecture is to discuss the process of documenting effective teaching practices, period. Within this lecture, the following will be discussed: challenges with Nevada's evaluation process, readings from this week with suggestions on what should be added as evidence. So by the end of this lecture, you should understand how to use your evidence to communicate areas of growth, further development, and overall progress in meeting your teacher professional goals. So before we get started, remember I didn't start my teaching career here. I went through a traditional route of teaching in New York State. I'm from New York, upstate New York. And I went through, in our state, you have to have do student teaching and earn a master's degree. So I went to a teacher college. Teaching was my first goal. I didn't know which grade level or institute type I would be in, but I knew that I would always be an educator. So my process of getting to where I am today is a little bit different. I did my student teaching experience in Albany, New York, within an inner city, in both secondary settings. So for us, middle school is separated from high school at 6th grade to 8th grade, and then 9th to 12th would be secondary. And then I moved to North Carolina and started teaching and stayed there. So when I moved here, I had a lot of preconceived notions about what the process of education looked like, because this was my 6th or 7th year teaching. So my thoughts about what should and should not be were kind of very different. My first year in my observation process, I'm not going to say what school I was in, but the first thing I was told was that everyone received 3s or 4s. And I didn't understand why. I thought that it was kind of a betrayal of the way that educators should be assessed. And I was just kind of confused about how can we all be at the same level. So I learned from that year that Nevada has some very interesting evaluation tactics that they use, and not all of them are created equal. The problem with that is, as you'll see in the first article, so I went back to the content I added this article to kind of give you a reason why you have to do this for yourself. So the problem with not having such a subjective evaluation process is that it doesn't help you reach your goals as an educator. So I think living in this state and teaching in this state requires you to, if this is what you want to do for the rest of your life, which I know people enter into the teaching profession for different reasons, but as an educator, this is like my first passion. This is my love, the thing that brings me joy every day. I think it's vital that you create your own system of tracking your progress, because you can't depend on your evaluations to do that, especially if your administrators are going through some other things where they may think it's unfair to rate you in a certain way, or for the sake of numbers and readings of data for schools. I don't know. This article the first article goes into a little bit why assessments vary as far as evaluations for educators. And then we have the teacher rubric examples, and then the teacher evaluation suggested artifacts and evidence. But even if you have a great evaluation that you feel captures your growth, I really do think that where we are in the day and age of teaching, feedback is rare. So how do you ensure that you're doing your job and you're doing it well? Because the impact is great, right? You probably see about 200 students or more a day. So that's 200 people, 200 little people, 200 future people that will be entering the world with whatever you say or not say to them. So I think it's a high impact and it's worth exploring. So the first article here talks about the flaws, and if you click on the actual article, you will see a video link that comes up. I'm not going to show the video link because I do know that it has an echo. So just to, save your ears, I'm not going to have that up. But take a look at the video and the article, which talks about why, especially for development teachers, which none of you are, the ratings are different and they may not want to select developing, or what these indicators mean to a school, and then how some of the ratings are flawed and they need changes. And from there, so this got me thinking, what can you do as an educator to ensure that you are growing? So just like with any, business, sorry about that. Just like any business that you venture into, it's important that you know how to track and see your growth. So teachers have it's a crazy career to a certain extent, because there's so many areas that you need to track for growth. So that's why for me, I created my binder. I have this binder every year, one of my few binders, and in this binder I align my standards with everything I want to be in there. It will have rubrics, it's going to have the unit plan set, my curriculum that I'm in the process of developing now. I'll be teaching 10th grade honors in English 12 next year. So I like to see high impact and track it from day one. So the summer, I know that, it's like, oh, it's summertime. This is a great opportunity for you to actually conduct a thorough investigation of your year using reflective practices through the self-assessment tool, which you'll see. And then you can examine areas identified as gaps in your summative evaluation. So if you really use it and utilize some of the processes that they recommend and the two documents that I provided to you, you should be able to see and map out the next year over the summer. You should be able to see what you're doing with a strategy, because you'll be able to track the data. And then for me, I have my own data sheet that I will utilize to then show, this growth. So I like Microsoft Excel because you can keep the numbers in and put the standards in and all that great stuff. And I can show you that if you are interested. And I'll probably add it in as a resource. However, the truth of the matter is you're responsible for your own career. So regardless of what the expectations and standards are for the state, I think it's important that you know how to see your growth and development as you continue to progress in your career. So evidence building and tracking starts now. Like I said in the last slide, it's not something that's a second thought. I think that was a misconception I had when I started teaching, that, okay, evaluation time, I gather my artifacts. No, you should be setting up these things as a part of your creating and design of your year. So it says here, one of the most valuable lessons the educator can learn is how to recognize their own growth and ability. If the year is set up to support goals, and growth tracking is easier. To begin, create a binder. So I showed you my paper binder. I like the paper binder because I can put this stuff in as I'm going through the units. The reason I have the binder is because I put it with the standards. So when I'm sitting and talking to someone about my career, because it is my career, I like to have the indicators very clear. So I don't want to second guess when someone says, how are you achieving this standard? How are you achieving this standard? Because when they come into your room one time or two times or three times, it's only a very quick glimpse of what you're actually doing. And some of you are doing extremely over the top, over the moon work from what I'm reading, and you have to be able to show that. So this is kind of my way of tracking my own growth, but also demonstrating what I'm doing. It says that At each standard or goal section, be sure to add a reflective summary sheet. These are great as they enable you to show the in-action reflection you are doing throughout. And then prior to the start of the year, create rubrics for each of the major projects. Smaller rubrics can be added as you progress through the year. So I don't know what your processes are. I create a curriculum map. I've started to do that because I've always found that entering the year confused is not a good place. Even if your school has something set up, you can use your curriculum map as a supplemental guide. But the key thing is that you're adding it early. So if you're creating a curriculum guide, there should be rubrics created alongside it, and you should be able to ascertain the goals that you're seeking to achieve, or the student goals you're seeking to achieve within those activities that should align to the evidence that you present. So our first reading, or the first document that I added is here, and I know I'm over time a little bit, but teacher rubric examples of evidence for each standard and indicator. So although the language is a little different because this is for another evaluation type, it's just a general thing. So standard 1, curriculum planning and assessment, which will be our teacher, the student growth goals. And then you can add those here. So they have all the examples of what you should or should not be using, which I think are pretty great examples. I'm actually going to be using these myself, or I use a lot of these. Teaching all students, which is a huge thing, standard 2. And then it goes into family and community engagement, which I think is pretty important, because how do you track and show, what you're doing to communicate with parents? So, and it also has here examples of culturally appropriate communications to the home. So that would mean, if you have dual language homes, then you are, or trilingual homes, people who speak multiple languages, you're kind of trying to meet them where they are. Maybe you have examples of Google documents that you have transcribed to meet the language that is their home language, or whatever the case may be. And then here you have your contributions to your IEP and our 504 team meeting, communications through iPads if that's what you use, syllabus or course organizer, open house communication, and description of why it was successful. So here is where you'd add like how you're communicating from day one. So I would add my introduction letter, and you name it. Here you have professional culture, and it just goes into the rest of them. So I know that you can read that yourselves, and these are really good. I think the reason why I like that document, I'm all about, supporting the easier way of getting to what we need to get to, is because it tells you exactly what to put there. So all you need to do is kind of print it out and then build from there. The second article that's in here, teacher evaluation suggested artifacts and evidence, shows you the artifacts and evidence that you should be adding to your actual binder. So go through this and kind of get a feel for what you should or should not be having. I like all of these components. You can probably set up your binder with these components in there. Maybe at the end I'll show you my, in 2 weeks I should have a more developed binder. I'm in the process of starting it. So, but this is great. This is something that you can use to start creating your binder if you choose to. And don't forget, it can be digital as well. So to close, I thought that Bill Gates' TED Talk actually wraps up a lot of things that I think need to be said in regards to the challenges with evaluations and understanding how to ensure effective teaching is taking place. Know that you are not alone in the struggle. The fact that Bill Gates, who's not an educator but has a strong base in education with all his donations and educational programs associated with Microsoft, I think it's important that you know that, this is a hard part of being an educator, but the truth of the matter is that you can make it a lot easier for yourself if you set up a system that encourages your growth and development and tracking of it. So please take a look at this video. It's not really supplemental content. It's more or less a kind of overall thought that people are entering as they try to conquer the challenges with education. If you have any questions, please let me know, and I hope that you have a great week.